The rain in Harlan County doesn't wash things clean, it just makes the mud deeper. It was a Thursday evening, the kind that hangs low and gray over the mountains, trapping the smoke from the chimneys in the valley floor. Silas Vance sat on the tailgate of his rusted Chevrolet pickup, watching the water drip off the brim of his hard hat. He hadn't taken it off yet. He hadn't even washed his face. He was 24 years old, but his eyes looked 50. Te were blue, piercing through a mask of coal dust that covered every inch of his skin. He held a lit cigarette in fingers that were permanently stained black, the nicotine providing the only warmth in the damp evening air. Behind him, the Black Bear mine hummed a constant, mechanical drone of conveyor belts and ventilation fans that never slept. Silas was waiting. He wasn't waiting for the shift boss, and he wasn't waiting for a ride. He was waiting for a glimpse of something that didn't belong here anymore. Across the muddy lot, past the way station, a small blue sedan pulled up to the old general store. A woman stepped out. She was wearing a yellow raincoat that seemed to glow against the gray backdrop of the slag piles. It was Clara Jenkins, the girl who had sat in front of him in 3rd grade, the girl who had left the Hollow 4 years ago to go to university in Lexington, the girl who swore she would never come back to this dusty hellhole. But here she was, back for her father's funeral, standing like a bright flower in a field of ash. Silas dropped his cigarette into the mud and crushed it with the heel of his heavy rubber boot. He knew he shouldn't go over there. He smelled like diesel and sweat. He was everything she had run away from, but his legs moved on their own, carrying him across the gravel lot, drawn to her light like a moth to a flame. Silas. She turned, shielding her eyes from the drizzle. When she saw him, her expression didn't harden like he expected. It's soft. Silas Vance. Is that you under all that dirt? Her voice was the same sweet, with that mountain twang she had tried to scrub away at college but couldn't quite lose. It's me, Clara, Silas said, stopping a few feet away, conscious of the invisible barrier between them. I heard about your daddy. I'm real sorry. He was a good man. Clara nodded, looking at the ground. He was a stubborn man. Silas died waiting on a pension that never came. She looked up at him, her green eyes searching his face. And look at you. You stayed. You're working? The bear? It's a living, Silas shrugged, a defensive habit he had picked up. Pays the bills. Keeps the lights on for my pops. Clara sighed, a sound of frustration and pity. Pops, ... How is he? Silas looked away, toward the dark mouth of the mine shaft. Black lung got him bad. Clara. He can't walk to the mailbox without winding. Someone's got to pay for the oxygen tanks. Tira Eat was the chain that bound him to the mountain. Clara took a step closer, ignoring the grime on his coveralls. She reached out and touched his arm. The contrast was startling her pale, clean hand against his soot-stained sleeve. You were the smartest boy in our class. Silas, you were supposed to be an engineer. You were supposed to build bridges, not dig holes. I build bridges underground, he said softly, a half-smile cracking the dust on his face. Keeps the roof from falling on our heads. They stood there in the rain, two ghosts of a future that never happened. The shift whistle blew, a mournful shriek that echoed off the canyon walls. It was the sound of reality crashing back in. I'm in town for a week, Clara said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I'm staying at the old house. Come by, please. Before I go back to Lexington. Silas looked at her, really looked at her. He knew it was a bad idea. He knew it would only make the leaving harder. I'll try, he said. But they both knew he would be there. The drive home was a blur. Silas lived in a company house that the mine had sold to his grandfather 50 years ago. It sat on a steep incline, propped up by cinder blocks. Inside, the air smelled of stale tobacco and sickness. His father, Old Man Vance, sat in the recliner, a plastic tube running under his nose, connected to a hissing green tank. That you, boy? His father wheezed, not opening his eyes. Yeah, Pops. It's me. Silas walked into the kitchen, opening the fridge. It was mostly empty, a jar of pickles, some bologna, and a six-pack of beer. He cracked a beer and drank half of it in one swallow. The coal dust in his throat needed washing down. "Shift. Go okay?" his father asked, a coughing fit rattling his chest. "Fine. Pops. We hit a sandstone pocket in Section 2. Slow going, but the roof is holding." Silas didn't mention Clara. He didn't want to see the disappointment in his father's eyes, the fear that his son might actually leave him alone to die in this valley. That night, Silas scrubbed himself raw in the shower. He used the heavy-duty pumice soap, scouring his skin until it was red and angry. He got most of the black off, but the coal has a way of staying under the fingernails and around the eyes, like permanent eyeliner. He put on his best shirt, a plaid button-down that was only slightly frayed at the collar, and drove to the Jenkins place. The week that followed was a dream. Silas worked the graveyard shift, 10 hours of darkness, breaking his back, installing roof bolts. But when he clocked out at dawn, instead of sleeping, he would meet Clara. They walked along the ridgeline, where the air was thinner and cleaner. They sat by the creek, skipping stones like they were kids again. "I have an interview in Lexington," Clara told him on the 4th day. "At a design firm. They pay? Well, Silas. Enough for an apartment with 2 bedrooms. Enough ... Enough for 2 people. She didn't look at him when she said it. She looked at the water. Silas felt his heart hammer against his ribs. "What are you saying, Clara?" She turned to him, her eyes fierce. "I'm saying, come with me. Leave the bear. Leave the dust. You have a brain, Silas. You can get a certification. You can work construction in the city. Just get out of that hole before it kills you like it killed my dad, like it's killing yours." "I can't leave Pops," Silas said, the words tasting like ash. "He's got nobody else. The pension is gone. If I quit, the health insurance goes. He dies, Clara. He dies in pain." Clara grabbed his shoulders. "He's dying anyway, Silas. Don't you see? The mountain takes everyone eventually. You don't have to be a martyr." "De fought." It was the desperate, passionate fighting of 2 people who love each other but stand on opposite sides of a canyon. Clara left him standing on the riverbank, tears streaming down her face. Silas went to work that night with a fire in his belly, swinging his sledgehammer with a rage that frightened the other men. The climax came 2 days later. It was Saturday. Clara was leaving on Sunday morning. Silas was on the day shift. The weather had turned. A massive storm system had stalled over Harlan County, dumping inches of rain onto the saturated mountains. The creeks were rising, turning into raging brown torrents. Underground, the mine felt damp. Water was weeping from the coal seams, dripping from the roof bolts. "It's wet today, boys. The foreman?" A gruff man named Miller shouted over the machinery. "Keep an eye on the sump pumps. We don't want to flood out the section." Silas was operating the shuttle car, driving back and forth between the continuous miner and the Beltline. His mind was miles away, in a blue sedan driving to Lexington. "She's right," a voice in his head whispered. "I am burying myself here." He thought about the application forms Clara had shoved into his glove box. Technical school. A new life. Suddenly, the power cut. The massive hum of the ventilation fans died. The lights on the machinery flickered and went out. Total, absolute darkness engulfed them, save for their cap lamps. "What the hell?" someone shouted. Then they heard it. Not the groan of rock, this time, but a roar, like a freight train made of liquid. "Water!" Miller screamed. "In rush! Get to the high ground! Move!" The old maps were wrong. They had cut too close to an abandoned mine adjacent to them, a mine that had been filling with rainwater for 50 years. The barrier wall had breached. Millions of gallons of black, stagnant water were rushing into the Black Bear. Silas slammed the shuttle car into neutral and jumped out. The water hit his ankles instantly, freezing cold and smelling of sulfur and rot. Within seconds, it was at his knees. "Go!" He shoved the younger guys toward the escapeway. The incline was steep, and the water was rising fast, chasing them up the slope. Panic is a contagion in a mine. Men slipped and fell in the rising tide. Silas grabbed Miller, who was struggling. The older man was heavy. His breathing labored. "Leave me! Keyed!" Miller gasped. "Get out! Shut up and move!" Silas roared, hauling the foreman up by his belt. They scrambled up the ventilation shaft, the water lapping at their boots. The roar was deafening. Silas thought of his father. If he died, who would change the oxygen tank? Then he thought of Clara. If he died, she would drive away tomorrow, thinking he had chosen the coal over her. She would never know he had the application in his pocket. Primera jahua ente tu life. The thought was crystal clear, sharper than it had ever been. It wasn't about duty anymore. It was about survival. He wanted to see the sun. He wanted to see Clara in that yellow raincoat. They reached the upper level just as the lower haulageway completely flooded. They were trapped, cut off from the main elevator, but they were high and dry for now. They huddled in a crosscut, shivering, wet, and terrified. The water level stabilized a few feet below them. "We're stuck," Miller coughed, shining his light into the black pool below. "Main shaft is flooded. They'll have to pump it out. Could take days." Days. Silas sat against the cold rock wall. He checked his watch. 4 p.m. Clara was packing her car right now. She would leave at 8 a.m. tomorrow. If he didn't get out, she would leave. She would think he didn't care. "I'm not waiting days," Silas said, standing up. He looked at the ventilation map on the wall. The old air shaft, the one near the number 3 fan. "It comes out near the creek bed." Miller shook his head. "That shaft hasn't been used in 20 years. Silas, it's probably collapsed. It's suicide." "Staying here is suicide," Silas said, tightening his belt. "The methane is going to rise as the water pushes the gas up. We have to move." He looked at the other 3 men with them. "I'm going." "Who's coming?" It was a grueling, claustrophobic nightmare. They crawled through the old air return, a tunnel barely 3 feet high, choked with rock dust and debris. They had to belly crawl through mud, dragging their bodies over sharp slate. Silas led the way, his mind focusing on one image: Clara's face. Every time his muscles screamed, every time the fear of a cavern gripped his throat, he forced himself to picture her. Just one more yard? Just one more turn? He wasn't digging coal today. He was digging for his life. 6 hours later, night had fallen above ground. The rain was still pouring. Near the overflowing creek bed, a rusty metal grate hidden in the brush began to shake. With a final, superhuman effort, Silas kicked the grate open from the inside. He pulled himself out into the mud, gasping for air. The rain hit his face, and it felt like a baptism. He dragged Miller out behind him. Then the others. They lay in the wet grass, covered in sludge, alive. The sirens were wailing in the distance at the main gate, but they were miles away. Silas didn't wait for the ambulance. He stumbled to his feet. His truck was at the mine, but the Jenkins place was only 2 miles over the ridge. He started running. His boots were heavy, filled with water. His lungs burned. But he ran. He reached the Jenkins house just as the sun was starting to hint at the horizon. The blue sedan was packed, sitting in the driveway. The lights in the house were off. She was ready to go. Silas pounded on the door, his fist leaving a black mark on the white wood. "Clara! Clara!" The door opened. She stood there, holding a coffee cup, looking tired and sad. When she saw him wet, covered in mud, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, looking like a monster emerging from the swamp, she dropped the cup. It shattered on the porch. "Silas!" she screamed. "My God, the radio. They said the mine flooded. They said everyone was trapped. I got out!" Silas wheezed, collapsing against the doorframe. "I crawled out. Through the vent shaft." He looked up at her, his blue eyes shining through the filth. "I got out because I couldn't let you leave without me." Clara fell to her knees, wrapping her arms around his wet, dirty neck, ruining her clean clothes without a second thought. She cried into his shoulder, rocking him back and forth. "I'm done, Clara," he whispered into her hair. "I'm done with the bear. I can't breathe down there anymore." "We'll figure it out," she sobbed. "We'll figure it out." The epilogue takes place 3 months later. The scene is a small apartment in Lexington. It's small, but it has a balcony that overlooks a park, not a slag heap. Silas is sitting at a desk, a textbook open in front of him. His hands are cleaner now. The coal stains are fading, though the lines in his palms will always be gray. His father is in a care facility nearby, a good one, paid for by the settlement money from the mine accident lawsuit. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to buy their freedom. Clara walks in, carrying 2 plates of dinner. She kisses the top of Silas's head. "You studying hard?" "Trying." Silas smiles, closing the book on structural engineering. "Building bridges. Remember?" He looks out the window. The sun is setting, painting the sky purple and gold. There is no coal dust in the air. He takes a deep breath, and for the first time in his life, his lungs feel completely full. He misses the mountains sometimes. He misses the brotherhood of the dark. But then he looks at Clara, and he looks at his hands that are learning to build instead of destroying. He knows he made the right choice. The coal stays in the ground. The heart stays with the living.